What if Robb Stark had arrived just moments before Ned Stark's head fell? The swords were drawn. The crowd was silent. And then steel clashed with steel. Chaos. A dire wolf's howl. Blood spilled. But it wasn't Ned Stark's. Okay, pause. Did anyone else just get chills? Because what happens next literally flips the entire board of Westeros upside down. If you think the Red Wedding was brutal, this is something else. Let's get into it. The plan was madness. Desperate, reckless, and impossible. But Robb Stark had made a choice. He wasn't going to sit in River Run and wait. He wasn't going to let the Lannisters dictate the war. And he sure as hell wasn't going to let his father die a traitor's death in the capital. With the help of Blackfish, Arya's whispered rumors in the shadows of the Red Keep, and a small handful of men loyal to the North hiding among the chaos of King's Landing, Robb did the unthinkable. He entered the Lion's Den. The morning of the execution, the people gathered at the great September Queen, Cersei, stood beside King Joffrey, her smug smile barely hiding her satisfaction. Sansa wept. Arya crouched in the crowd with needle clutched tight. She was ready to strike. But she wasn't alone. Beneath the September, in the black cells, Ned Stark sat broken, physically weakened, beard overgrown, wrists chained to the wall. He had confessed to treason to protect his daughters. He thought it would buy them time. He thought mercy still had a place in the capital. But mercy had died with Robert Baratheon. 3 nights earlier, Varys had stood before him and whispered, "There's a chance, but it will come at great cost." Ned had nodded, not understanding. The cost? It would be blood. It would be war. It would be everything. Suddenly, the ground trembled. A distant boom shook the cells. The guards snapped to attention. Screams echoed from above. Then a roar, not of fire, but of war. Gray wind burst in the shadows, tearing through gold cloaks like cloth. Behind him came a blur of Northmen. Steel flashing in torchlight, voices rising in battle cries. Robb Stark himself stormed forward, sword in hand, face carved in fury. "You said he was dead," a guard stammered. "He was," the captain whispered, just before Robb's blade cut him down. Ned blinked. "Robb." "Come on," Robb growled, slashing his father's chains. "We're not staying long." "Oh my God, this is insane. Think about it. Robb Stark didn't just win battles. He stormed the capital. While everyone's eyes were on Joffrey's crown, the young wolf stole the heart of the realm. Back at the September of Baelor, chaos erupted. The executioner had raised his blade. But instead of falling, it clattered to the stones as a spear took him in the gut. Lannister guards surged forward. Arya leapt from the crowd, slicing through the leg of a soldier who reached for Sansa. Cersei screamed. Joffrey called for the King's Guard, but Ser Barristan hesitated. He'd had enough of madness. Then the bell tolled, and not for Ned. Within minutes, the black cells were flooded with smoke, fire, and screams of battle. Robb held his father upright. Ned's knees buckled, but the sight of Arya slicing to the ankle of a guard gave him strength. They didn't come for mercy. They came for war. And here's where it gets crazy. As they fought their way out, Sansa ran. Her dress torn, hair flying, she threw herself at Robb and sobbed. He pulled her close. "We're going home." But home was no longer the same. Not after this. The escape was chaos. Half the Northmen who entered never made it out. Gray Wind was wounded. Arya had blood on her face, not her own. Ned clutched a blade in one hand, his daughter's arm in the other. And behind them, screaming, iron, fire. The moment they crossed the city gates, Robb turned and looked back. The Red Keep burned at its edges. Bells tolled again, but they didn't mourn the dead. They warned the living. "King's Landing belongs to the Lions," Ned whispered. "Not anymore," Robb said. And just like that, the war changed forever. Wait, what? Did Robb just survive storming the capital? With his father and sisters? Yep. But trust me, it gets worse for the Lannisters and bloodier for the realm. Back in the throne room, Cersei raged. Her screams echoed like banshee wails. How did they get in? Where were the guards? Joffrey shrieked. I want their heads. I want their heads on spikes. But the small council was in shambles. Varys was gone. Littlefinger vanished. Pycelle feigned illness, and Ser Barristan threw his white cloak to the floor. "I will not serve a butcher," he said. The capital turned on itself. Loyalists to the crown clashed with those who feared Robb's wrath. Whispers flooded the streets. "Ned Stark lives. The wolf has come to the lion's door." Meanwhile, in the Riverlands, Walder Frey hesitated. Tywin Lannister seethed. Stannis Baratheon adjusted his plans. Renly halted his march. The North had stolen the South's greatest prisoner and humiliated the crown. That wasn't just rebellion. That was declaration of war. Now think about this. What happens when Ned Stark returns to Winterfell alive, but changed? When Arya no longer looks at the world with wonder, but with cold, calculated rage. When Sansa stops dreaming of songs and starts remembering screams. And Robb, oh Robb, he was a young wolf. Now he was a legend, but legends burn bright and fast. Here's where the real nightmare begins. Because the Lannisters aren't just angry, they're humiliated. Their power came from fear, and now that fear is cracked, Tywin Lannister doesn't play games. He plays endgames. And now for him it's personal. As for Catelyn, she waits at Riverrun, unaware that her son just rewrote history. But when she sees Ned, alive, scarred, but standing, she weeps. Not just for joy, but because she knows what this means. There's no peace after this. No safe North. No protected family. The Starks didn't just save Ned. They started something they might not survive. So, yeah, Robb rescued Ned from the Black Cells. But at what cost? And guess what? This is only the beginning. Smash that like if you thought Ned Stark would never get a second chance. And get ready. They rode hard and fast, but no one outran war. Robb Stark led the battered remnants of his force northward through Riverlands, every mile soaked in blood and risk. Ned rode beside him, his face gone from weeks in Black Cells, eyes sunken with guilt and fury. Behind them, Arya barely spoke. Sansa wept when she thought no one was looking. The men whispered in low voices, still unable to believe what they'd done. They had stolen the hand of the king from the gallows. They had humiliated the crown. And they had lit the first match on the wildfire that was now spreading through the Seven Kingdoms. "You realize what you've done?" Ned finally said, voice low, hoarse. This wasn't rescue. It was a declaration. Robb didn't answer at first. He stared ahead at the woods, the hills, the endless miles of danger between them and Winterfell. "I know," he finally said, "but I couldn't let them take your head. I couldn't let them win. But they will come for us now. Every last one of them. Joffrey, Cersei, Tywin. The entire realm will call us traitors." "Then let them come," Robb said. "The North remembers." Oh, and here's where it gets insane. Because Tywin Lannister wasn't about to let this insult go unanswered. Word reached him at Harrenhal within a day. Ned Stark alive. Robb Stark, the butcher of King's Landing. His city disgraced. His grandson's reign laughed at. The lion had been bloodied, and now he bared his fangs. Tywin's rage didn't explode. It simmered, calculated, surgical. "Send ravens," he said, "to every lord who owes me a favor, every bannerman who fears northern wolves. We answer with fire." In King's Landing, Cersei was losing control by the hour. The small folk whispered that Joffrey was no true king, that a Rhaegal king wouldn't let a prisoner escape, that the wolves had struck first blood. Streets rioted, gold cloaks deserted, and worst of all, Sansa Stark was gone. The symbol of mercy Joffrey thought he owned had been torn away from under his nose. "Find her," Cersei hissed. "Find the girls. Find the wolf. Kill them all." Meanwhile, Arya stared out over the Riverlands as the sun dipped low. "I should have killed more of them," she muttered. "You killed enough," Robb said. "No, I didn't. Holy crap. Is anyone else watching Arya harden right before our eyes? This is the birth of something much darker than we ever saw in canon." Ned rode quietly beside his daughters, still aching from wounds, still haunted by the words he'd spoken in September, words that called him a traitor, that spit on the honor he had built his life upon. But Robb was changing. He had tasted blood in the capital. He had commanded men beneath the Red Keep. He had fought Lannisters on their own ground and lived. The North would never follow anyone else now. He wasn't just a boy lord. He was a war king. And then drama hits again. Because at River Run, Catelyn Tully waited. The gates opened. She ran toward the riders. She saw her son and stopped because behind him, barely standing, was Ned. Her breath caught. Her knees buckled. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched his face. "Ned, is it?" He nodded, and then she slapped him. Hard. "You fool," she whispered. "You were going to die for honor and leave us all behind." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. But joy came fast, and so did strategy. Because Robb's army was wounded, their numbers thinned. They had committed the greatest heist in Westerosi history, but now they had to hold the line. And that's when Roose Bolton arrived. Yep, Roose, the same man who, in the true timeline, helped orchestrate the Red Wedding. Only this time, he was smiling. "You've made quite the name for yourself, Lord Stark," Roose said. "The wolves are howling across the realm. Will you answer the call?" Robb asked. Roose just smirked. "Oh, I already have. The leeches are ready." "Wait, what?" "Hold on. That man is already giving Red Wedding energy, and we're only in part 2. If you're getting chills, buckle up, because betrayal is brewing already." Meanwhile, Tywin wasn't sitting still. He summoned Jaime, fresh from bloody skirmishes near the Trident. "They've humiliated us," Tywin said, "and that cannot stand. Ride north. Burn their homes. Make the small folk suffer." But Jaime raised an eyebrow. "And Sansa? Dead or alive, she no longer matters." Jaime hesitated. "Even if she carries his heir?" Tywin's eyes narrowed. "Especially then." Let that sink in. Because in this timeline, Sansa left King's Landing with a secret. A mismoon. A growing fear. And she hadn't told anyone. Not even her sister. If that child existed, it could be a Stark and a Baratheon. A true threat to the Lannister legacy. And here's where the tension spikes again. As Robb planned to regroup at Riverrun, more lords began to rally. The Karstarks, the Mormonts, even men from the Vale, disillusioned with Lysa's silence, began sending quiet support. But one man stood at the edge of the storm, watching with sharp eyes and sharper ambition. Peter Baelish. Littlefinger had seen empires fall, and now he saw opportunity. "Ned Stark alive?" he muttered. "Robb a king? Oh, the chaos is delicious." And somewhere, far to the east, Daenerys Targaryen heard of the Wolf King, who struck the crown and lived. The breaker of chains paused. For the first time, the North had a king worth watching. "Westeros bleeds," she whispered, "and no one sits safely on the throne." So, yeah, Robb rescued Ned. But in doing so, he cracked the foundation of the 7 kingdoms. The War of the 5 Kings? Try 7, because new players are coming. And old ones, they're just getting started. Think you've seen madness? The Raven arrived at dawn. A single scroll, sealed in crimson wax, bearing the golden line of House Lannister. Robb stared at it in silence while Grey Wind paced behind him, growling low like he already knew what was inside. Catelyn watched her son's jaw tighten. Arya gripped her sword belt. And Ned, older now not by years but by pain, read every word again and again, like they might change if he stared long enough. "Tywin has declared war," Robb said at last. "No," Ned muttered. "He's declared extermination." The letter didn't beg for peace. It didn't negotiate hostages. It simply promised fire. For every Lannister knight killed in King's Landing, 10 Northerners would die. For every humiliation suffered by the crown, a town would burn. Tywin's army was marching, not for glory, for vengeance. And here's where it gets terrifying. Tywin wasn't coming for battle. He was coming for slaughter. He split his forces, one heading toward Riverrun, another sweeping to the Riverlands, and the third, that one went west through the mountains with a new kind of fury. And leading it was Jaime Lannister. Meanwhile, the North was stirring like it hadn't in centuries. For the first time since Torrhen knelt Aegon, the old lords gathered not as bannermen, but as equals. In Riverrun's great hall, Mormont Karstark, Glover, Reed, Umber, all sat beneath the stark direwolf. They weren't just rallying to Robb now. They were asking for a kingdom. You stole the heart of the South, Great John Umber bellowed. You saved the Warden of the North from the lion's cage. No more kneeling to Southern kings. The King in the North, someone shouted. And just like that, again the title was reborn. But this time, Ned was there to hear it. He rose slowly, shaking off pain like a second cloak. This honor belongs to my son, but so does the burden. Robb Stark did what no lord dared. He defied the crown. He saved his father. He tore down the false peace built by liars and cowards. If you would call him king, he paused, then you must also follow him to war. They stood, one by one, swords drawn, and outside the hall, the cold winds of the north howled like ghosts awakened. Okay, but wait. Let's not forget something huge. You ready? Sansa, pregnant, silent, hiding her sickness in the cold stone corners of Riverrun. She hadn't told anyone. Not Arya, not her mother, not even her father. She didn't even know if it was true, only that she missed her moon twice, and her body was betraying her with fear and fire. That child could ruin everything, or change everything. She stood by the river one night, thinking of ending it, of ending herself. But then Arya found her. You're not weak, Arya said flatly. You're not a Lannister. Don't act like one. Sansa cried. Arya didn't. She just stood guard beside her sister until sunrise. The Stark girls, so different, yet now scarred by the same war. They weren't little girls anymore. They were survivors. Back in the capital, Cersei burned letters, executed maesters, beat Sansa's old handmaidens for answers. None came. The city was restless, starving, afraid. And Joffrey? He only wanted blood. They humiliated me, he shouted at the small council. I want to send the mountain. I want to see their heads rot on pikes. You want war, Ser Kevin said coolly. You will have it, but war comes at cost. Joffrey pouted. Then raise the taxes. The people have nothing left to give. Then take their lives. Yeah, that's the king now. A tantrum and a crown. And behind him, Cersei and Pycelle try and keep the city from collapsing, while Littlefinger smiled. Oh, this is getting interesting, he whispered, because chaos wasn't just a ladder anymore. It was a kingdom up for grabs. Now, let's talk about the wild twist no one saw coming. Roose Bolton sent a letter to Tywin, a sealed raven, carrying just 3 words, he trusts me. Wait, what? Are you telling me the Red Wedding is still on the table? Yes, I am. Because Robb's boldness, his defiance, his legend made him a threat. And Roose never liked threats he didn't control. So while the North rallied around the king in the North, the knife was already being sharpened behind his back. But here's where things flip again. Because Robb didn't just plan to hold the North. He wanted King's Landing. We don't march to protect the North, Robb told his council. We march to end this. Everyone fell silent, except Arya. Then let me go first. Robb blinked. Alone. I know the streets. I know the tunnels. I can get inside. You're not a soldier. No, I'm something worse. She left that night, under cover of darkness, with Needle at her side and death in her eyes. And guess what? She wasn't the only Stark returning to King's Landing, because in the far east, across the narrow sea, a dragon queen heard the whispers. She heard of a Stark king who burned the lion's pride, and she smiled. Maybe I don't need to conquer Westeros, Daenerys said. Maybe I need only one ally. Because what happens when fire meets wolf? What happens when Daenerys Targaryen sails not to claim, but to join? Oh, yeah, now we're cooking. We're 3 parts in, and the War of the 5 Kings has turned into a war that could consume the world. Ned lives. Robb rules. Arya is stalking shadows. Sansa hides a royal secret. And Tywin's sword is about to fall. King's Landing breathes smoke. The streets reeked of ash, waste, and fear. Windows shuttered. Markets empty. Every alley whispered rumors. Rumors of wolves, of rebels, of the traitor Ned Stark walking free beyond the neck, of his ghost riding beside a boy king. They were calling the breaker chains. Tywin Lannister called it treason. The small folk called it hope. And into this nest of fire and fear, Arya Stark returned. She slipped past the gates under a traitor's cloak. Her hair was chopped short, her face smudged with filth. She left Riverrun without a word, save a glance at Robb and a whispered promise. I'll get close enough to end him. Robb hadn't stopped her. He couldn't, because part of him knew war might win battles, but names ended bloodlines. And Arya had a list. Okay, pause. Arya Stark, trained killer, on the loose inside King's Landing. Right after Robb humiliated the crown? Oh, yeah, this just went nuclear. She moved like smoke through the capital. Shadows fed her. Rats warned her. Whispers told her all she needed. Joffrey was still alive. Tywin had returned, and the mountain was back in city. And Sansa? Still gone. They said she fled with the wolves. That she carried something more dangerous than a blade. Arya watched from rooftops, from behind barrels, from cracks in the stone walls of Flea Bottom. She saw Tywin ride through the city gates in gold armor, flanked by Lannister banners. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He came to restore order. Back in Riverrun, Robb was preparing to march again. But Ned wasn't on horseback this time. No, he said, gripping his son's shoulder. I will not go to war again. I will hold the North. You must finish this. And oh, the weight in those words. Robb nodded, jaw tight. I'll end it. But Catelyn saw something else in her son. A growing coldness. An edge that hadn't been there before the rescue. She saw war turning her boy into something older, harder, darker. And now, he had a new banner beside him. The dire wolf and the Tully trout, joined by House Baratheon. Because here's the twist that changed everything. Renly had reached out. He offered men, ships, gold. In exchange, recognition. He would crown Robb Warden of the North and East. If Robb bent the knee and declared for Renly's crown. But Robb didn't answer. Not yet. Let's see if he bleeds for her first, he told his council. Damn, Robb's not just fighting anymore. He's playing the game. But Tywin? Tywin was rewriting the rules. Arya slipped into the Red Keep on the fourth night. She followed the old catacombs. The one Syrio had whispered about. The one she remembered from Story's Hound had mumbled in his drunken threats. She watched the mountains sleep. She watched Pycelle write lies. She watched Joffrey scream at his mother, ordering a new execution. A message to the Starks, he shouted. If I can't have Sansa, I'll have her head. And Tywin didn't stop him, because Tywin had a plan. He always did. Cut 2, Harrenhal. Roose Bolton rides through smoking villages. Children cry. Northern blood is spilled by northern blades. And he smiles, because every house burned by his hand becomes a reason for Robb to trust him. We'll strike fast, Roose wrote, then feign retreat. Let them think us desperate. Let them think me loyal. But in his tent, in the dark, another raven waited. This one bound for Walder Frey. Because guess what? The Red Wedding? Still on the table. Let's go back to Arya. Because this is where it gets wild. She makes it to Joffrey's chambers. She stands in the shadows, needle in hand, heart pounding like a war drum. She sees him, sleeping, mouth open, sore by the bed. One move, one cut. She lifts the blade and freezes, not because of fear, because of footsteps. The door swings open. Cersei. Wait, what? What now? Arya and Cersei in the same room? The tension here could snap bone. Arya vanishes into the dark before Cersei sees her. But she hears it. Words that chill her to the core. We move tomorrow, Cersei says to her son's sleeping form. We burn the Riverlands. We raise the twins. Let them drown in red. We take their castle, and when Robb Stark begs, you show him his sister's heads. Arya slips away, eyes wet, heart colder than stone. She doesn't kill Joffrey. She leaves the keep that night, runs to the city's edge, mounts a waiting horse. and rides. 3 days later, she returns to Riverrun. She throws herself into Robb's tent, slams a dagger down. They're planning another red wedding. Robb stares. How do you know? Because I was in his room. Silence. Then he looks to Roose Bolton, standing across the table. Roose smiles. And now the game is blood, because Robb knows there's a snake in his camp. But he doesn't know which head bites first. Catelyn warns him. He betrayed you once. He'll do it again. But Robb hesitates, because war is teeth, and sometimes you ride with wolves even when you know they're starving. And guess what? That night, a raven arrives. From Stannis Baratheon. You have humiliated the false king. It reads, you have shown strength. When you are ready to end this farce of a war, I will march with you. Fire and steel. One king seeks alliance. Another plots betrayal. And Robb? Robb makes a decision that changes the realm. We don't wait for them to strike. We march to the twins. We make them bend the knee. And the council gasps. You would attack Walder Frey? Robb's eyes burn. I would destroy him. The snows were falling heavier now. The banners of House Stark, House Tully, and the Baratheon stag fluttered in the cold wind as Robb Stark's host advanced toward the twins. Not as guests, but as conquerors. No music, no feasts, no olive branches. This wasn't a wedding. It was an execution. Robb had learned. No more trust. No more honor plays. The Lannisters had taught him that. The Boltons were teaching it again. Walder Frey sat in his towers, fat and gloating, flanked by a host of sons and grandsons, crossbows ready. But this time, Robb came armed with fury, not flowers. He didn't send an envoy. He didn't send a raven. He sent a warning. Ahead, Ser Forlay Prester, one of Tywin's bannermen, captured near Harrenhal, stripped of his armor and flung over the walls of the twins like a sack of flour. This is what happens to those who serve lions. The note read, and Walder Frey? He panicked. Okay, this is madness. In the original timeline, Robb got played like a fiddle at the Red Wedding. Now he's playing the damn symphony. Catelyn rode beside him, face pale, voice quiet. If you attack the twins, you risk turning more river lords against us. Robb didn't look at her. And if I don't, Walder Frey becomes Tywin's dagger in my back. He's still a lord of the Trident. He's a rat in a tower, one fire, and the world forgets his name. Arya, riding on Robb's other side, smiled darkly. I want his name remembered, just long enough to carve it. Inside her cloak, she carried a list, and his name was written in blood. Meanwhile, far across the sea, on the shores of Meereen, a raven arrived bearing the seal of gold and red. Daenerys Targaryen stood on the steps of her pyramid, the letter in her hand. Beside her, Ser Europace. Missandei watched silently. Grey Worm stood still, hand on blade. Tywin's letter was short, cold, calculated. House Lannister offers peace. Gold, a seat at the table. If your dragons bring fire to the wolves. Dany crumpled the paper. And what of the Starks? She asked. They rebel, Yora said, but they are no different than the rest. They'll bend the knee when the wheel turns. But Dany was quiet. Her eyes narrowed. Robb Stark didn't wait for the wheel, she whispered. He broke it. Pause. Did you hear that? Daenerys admiring Robb Stark. Yeah, you know where this is going. Back at the twins, Robb prepared for siege. The Freys had shut the gates, manned the walls, loaded the towers with flaming pitch and poisoned arrows. They expected terms. They got Arya. She slipped through a water tunnel 2 nights before the siege began, crawled through mud and rot and rats, until she was inside the castle she once entered as a girl. She moved like death through shadows. By the time dawn rose, 6 Frey guard were dead, throats slit, bodies posed around the main hall, in a perfect circle. Walder Frey woke to the stench of blood and a message carved into the stone. The North remembers. He doubled the guards, shut the inner gates, locked his own wives in the cellar. And still, he felt her watching. Back at Riverrun, Roose Bolton watched the flames of the hearth flicker. A letter arrived from Tywin. Proceed. He folded it, burned it, smiled. But wait, it gets even crazier. Because as Robb prepared his catapults, his trebuchets, his siege ladders, a ship appeared on the horizon, a black ship with a silver dragon on its sail. What? Daenerys, Targaryen, at the twins. Everyone rushed to the shore. Robb stared in disbelief. Arya's hand went to her blade. Catelyn gasped, and then they saw her, white hair whipping the wind, leather armor strapped over her chest, and 3 dragons circling the sky above her ship like gods waiting to judge. Let's be clear. This wasn't an invasion. It was an intervention. Daenerys stepped onto northern soil with Unsullied at her back. Tyrion followed. Yes, Tyrion, having fled King's Landing weeks ago after Joffrey tried to pin Robb's rescue of Ned on him. Robb approached first, swords drawn. Dany raised a hand. I didn't come to fight you, she said. I came to offer you the one thing this realm has lost. And what's that? Robb asked. Balance. Boom. The wolf and the dragon, face to face. The moment that rewrites the entire Game of Thrones map. Daenerys offered a truce. Not allegiance. Not dominance. An alliance. Burn the Lannisters from the throne, she said, and I'll help you burn the rest of them from your lands. Robb hesitated. Catelyn whispered in his ear, Targaryens are madness. Arya on the other side, but they burn enemies fast. And Sansa? Sansa stayed quiet, because the child inside her stirred, and the name on its blood was Baratheon. If Daenerys found out, it could mean war, or something far worse. So now the battlefield shifted again. Robb Stark, with dragons at his back. Walder Frey, hiding in his tower, surrounded by ghosts. Tywin Lannister, watching all of it from the Red Keep, unmoved. They'll turn on each other, he told Cersei. And Cersei? She laughed. Then we just wait for the ashes. But Robb didn't wait. That night, Arya struck again, this time inside the kitchen. Poisoned food. A Frey wife. A bastard son. Gone. Panic spread. And when dawn came and Robb's army surrounded the twins with Unsullied in formation, he gave one final offer. Surrender the keep. Open the gates. Give me Walder Frey. And what if we refuse? Came the cry from the tower. Robb smiled. Then you can explain to a dragon why you thought the twins could survive fire. The first scream came at sunrise. Then fire. Not from catapults. Not from flaming arrows. From the sky. A sound like thunder shattered the silence as Drogon swooped low over the twins, black wings slicing through mist. The Freys barely had time to raise their eyes before the flames hit. The eastern tower, gone. Stone crumbled. Men screamed. The air turned to ash. Walder Frey watched from his window, mouth open, lips trembling, wine spilling down his robe as his favorite son ran screaming into the hallway, skin burning, armor melting. Okay, pause. We just watched history reverse itself. In the original timeline, this was the Red Wedding. Now, it's the Red Reckoning. Outside the castle, Robb Stark stood in full armor, sword drawn, Unsullied at his side, northern bannermen behind him. The sky above turned red and black. Daenerys stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes cold. Give me Walder Frey. Robb shouted. No answer. Just more screaming. Arya stepped forward. He won't come out. I know, Robb said, but he can't run. The second dragon, Regal, dove next. Flames poured across the bridge connecting the towers. It collapsed into the river like it was made of paper. The entire east wing crumbled. Inside, Freys ran like rats. And Arya? Arya vanished. She moved through the tunnels. The same tunnel she crawled through days before. She knew every twist now, every echo, and she knew exactly where Walder Frey would be hiding. The kitchens. The coward always hid where he thought no one would look. She found him clutching a wine cask, 2 of his grandsons shielding him with trembling swords. Who are you? One demanded. Arya said nothing. She stepped into the light, needle in her hand, blood on her face, and whispered, Valum Morgulus. 2 minutes later, Walder Frey's head hit the stones. She didn't make it fast. She wanted him to feel it. She carved the wolf into his chest before he bled out. By the time she returned to the courtyard, the banners of House Fry were falling in flames. One tower gone. The gate open. The defender surrendered without another word. Arya threw the head to Robb's feet. He stared at it, then at her. "You disobeyed me," he said coldly. "I finished it," she replied, then walked away. This is the moment everything shifts. Because up until now, Arya was Robb's dagger in the dark, his ghost, his weapon. Now, she's something else. Something no one can control. Later that night, Daenerys stood alone on the bridge overlooking the blackened remains of the twins. Dragons curled above, casting shadows on the water. Robb joined her, silent for a long moment. "You've never used them like that before," he said quietly. "They're not just weapons," she answered. "They're warnings." "To whom?" She turned. "To everyone who thinks the old ways will survive this war." They stared at each other. So different. And yet, "I didn't think you'd come," Robb admitted. "I came because you're the first man in Westeros who didn't ask to be king, but acts like one." That line, that shook Robb more than any battle ever had. Back in Riverrun, Catelyn watched the flames from afar. The twins burned like a second sun on the horizon. "You raised a wolf," she whispered. Roose Bolton watched, too, and he was not pleased. The red wedding was supposed to be his blade. Now, it was Robb's crown. But Roose didn't panic. He wrote another letter. This time, not to Tywin. This time, to Stannis Baratheon. "Let the North eat itself," it read. "And when the wolf and the dragon bleed each other, take the rest." Wait, what? Stannis is back in play? Oh, yes, because the king who claimed to fight for law and fire just got offered both. In the capital, the news hit like a hammer. Walder Frey dead, the twins destroyed, Arya Stark, the assassin haunting the realm. And worst of all, Robb Stark was now being called the Kingbreaker, not because he broke crowns, because he broke the rules. Joffrey screamed for a full hour when he heard the news. "He can't do this. I'm the king. I am." Cersei poured wine. "Then act like it." Tywin didn't scream. He closed his book. He stood, and he said 5 words that made the room go cold. "Bring me the mountain. Now." Back at Riverrun, Sansa could no longer hide it. The bump had grown. The sickness returned each morning. She confessed it to Catelyn in tears. I think it's Joffrey's." Catelyn froze. "And then," she broke, "you have to end it." Sansa sobbed. "It's still my child." Catelyn's voice cracked. "It's his weapon." So here we are. Robb Stark rules the Riverlands. The twins are ash. Daenerys flies above the North as an ally, but not yet a queen. Arya walks alone, carrying death like a cloak. Roose plots with Stannis. And in King's Landing, Tywin sharpens his final piece. The mountain. The North was rising, not in songs, not in whispers, in fire, in blood, in banners so black with ash they barely showed the direwolf anymore. And yet, Robb Stark stood taller than ever. King of the Riverlands, King of the North, the Kingbreaker. But with every victory came a cost. Inside Riverrun's war room, maps were spread like open wounds. Lannister banners dotted the south. Stannis' movements from Dragonstone had turned erratic. And far to the east, ravens reported Dothraki ships landing near Gulltown. Daenerys Targaryen was no longer hovering in alliance. She was advancing. "We trusted her," Catelyn hissed, voice low but sharp. "She was a guest. She gave you fire. And now she takes land." "She hasn't declared war," Robb said. "She doesn't need to." And just then, Arya walked in, covered in mud, her face blank, clothes soaked in rainwater and blood. No one asked where she'd been. Everyone already knew the answer. She threw a scroll on the table. "From the capital," she said, intercepted. "Ravens don't fly so well with slit throats." Robb picked up the scroll, cracked the seal, and read silently. Then his eyes went dark. "What's in the letter?" "Yeah, you're gonna hate this." The mountain was coming north, and he wasn't coming with soldiers. He was coming with heads. Tywin's final play wasn't strategy. It was terror. Gregor Clegane was unleashed with a black host of cutthroats, mercenaries, and criminal scum. No banners, no honor, just steel and savagery. Their orders? Burn every village that had flown the dire wolf. Take no prisoners. Leave nothing behind. By the time the first reports reached Riverrun, 6 villages were already gone. Women violated. Children nailed to trees. Men flayed and strung from rooftops. And on every body, a message burned into flesh. The Kingbreaker dies next. Robb didn't blink. We march, he said. Now. But as Robb prepared for war, the Dragon Queen arrived again. Only this time, she didn't come to ally. She came to negotiate. Daenerys arrived at the edge of Robb's camp with her dragons flying high and her soldiers flanking her like shadows. But her eyes weren't on Robb. They were on Sansa. Because the whispers had finally reached her ears, the Lady of Winterfell carried a child. A royal child. A Lannister Baratheon heir. A potential claim to the throne that could split Westeros in two. Dany didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She simply asked, "Is it true?" Sansa couldn't lie. Not with Dany staring through her like wildfire. She nodded once. That was all it took. Dany's jaw clenched. Her dragons roared from above like thunder. Okay, take a breath. Because here's where things start falling apart. That night, Daenerys told Robb the truth. If that child lives, she said, he'll be used. By your enemies. By mine. You've seen what Joffrey did to the realm. Imagine what his son could do with your banner. Robb didn't answer, because deep down he agreed. Sansa begged him. He's still my child. You can't, please, Robb. But Robb had already made too many hard choices. He'd killed too many to flinch now. I won't be the man who kills a babe in the cradle, he said finally. But I also won't protect a dagger pointed at the realm. Meanwhile, Arya disappeared again. Only this time, she wasn't hunting Freys. She was hunting Boltons. She'd found the letter Roose had sent to Stannis. She'd read it in the torchlight, memorized every word. Then she went south. Alone. By the time she reached Dreadfort, she had a new face, a new name. She served Roose's wine. She sharpened his blades. And then one night, as he sat in his hall alone, she whispered in his ear, "You shouldn't have trusted the leeches," and slit his throat from behind. No mercy, no chance for words, just red on red. Back at Riverrun, another raven arrived, from Dragonstone. Stannis Baratheon was marching, not against Robb, not against Dany, against King's Landing, because he'd received a message from Melisandre, the Red Woman, and it chilled him to his bones. The Boy King will die. The dragon must choose. The wolf must fall, or the realm will burn. A prophecy, a warning, a threat? Nobody knew. But Robb didn't have time to figure it out, because the mountain had reached the neck, and the Battle of Moat Cailin was about to begin. And guess what? Robb wasn't the only one preparing. Tywin was moving again, but not armies, not swords, gold. He was buying lords in the Vale, slipping poison into the court of Sunspear, whispering promises to the Iron Bank of Bravos. And one by one, allies began to fade. So here we are. Arya has become vengeance itself. Sansa's carrying a child who could shatter every alliance. Daenerys is torn between fire and diplomacy. Tywin has unleashed a monster on the realm. And Robb Stark is facing the biggest battle of his life. Because Gregor Clegane isn't a knight. He's a butcher, and the war is about to get personal. The battlefield at Moat Cailin stank of rot, iron, and fear. The bogs had swallowed hundreds. Corpses half-sunken. Banners dragged down into the muck. Swords still clutched in bone-white fingers. Crows circled overhead. The neck was narrow, brutal terrain, exactly the kind Robb Stark knew how to use. But this time, his enemy didn't come in waves or lines. He came like a plague. The mountain had arrived. Gregor Clegane, swollen with rage and slaughter, marched at the head of Tywin's deadliest host. Criminals, sellswords, deserters, and monsters in stolen armor. No banners, no mercy, just fire and steel. They called it the Black Tide. and Robb Stark stood waiting. The night before the battle, Robb sat with Grey Wind at his feet, his sword across his lap, and Daenerys watching him from across the fire. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then Dany finally said, "If you fall, the North falls with you." Robb didn't look up. "Then I won't fall. You think you're strong enough to beat death itself?" "No," Robb said, "but maybe I can outlive it. Okay, now buckle up, because this final chapter is where everything hits the fan. At dawn, the swamp steamed with heat. Mist rolled over the reeds, and from the mist, Robb's army emerged, silent, cold-eyed, ready to die. House Reed's men led the charge, blades dipped in poison, striking from the waters like ghosts. The Unsullied held the flanks. The Northmen roared down from higher ground, and for a moment, it looked like they might break the black tide, until Gregor Clegane himself stepped into the fray. Towering, snarling, covered in a cloak of flayed skins. He swung a great sword like it was a twig, and men, Robb's men, exploded under the weight of it. Limbs flew, bones shattered. Grey Wind leapt at him and was torn from the air. Robb screamed. The dire wolf hit the ground, whimpering, bones broken, and that's when Robb charged. Their clash was like myth. Fire against ice, rage against fury. Robb struck fast, 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 but the mountain shrugged off blade and shield like wind. Every blow he dealt felt like an avalanche. Robb barely dodged a killing strike, and still caught a shoulder wound so deep his arm went numb. But Robb didn't fall. He wouldn't fall. Not today. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Daenerys circled the skies on Drogon, burning the edges of the enemy host, refusing to torch the middle. Robb was still down there, and in the camp behind the lines, Sansa labored in pain. The child, Joffrey's child, was coming early. Arya stood at the tent flap, blade drawn, daring anyone to step too close. "She won't die," she said. "Not her. Not today." Sansa screamed, and outside, Robb was bleeding. Then came the turning point. Arya saw him, Gregor Clegane. She left Sansa's tent, walked through the chaos like it didn't touch her, smoke in her lungs, blood on her face. And she came up behind the mountain just as he raised his sword for the final blow. He never saw her, not even when she drove needle through the gap in his armor, just below the back of the neck, straight into spine. Gregor froze, dropped his sword, and crumbled, a giant undone by a ghost. Arya looked at Robb, then at Grey Wind. The dire wolf lay dying. Robb fell to his knees beside him, hands pressed to the beast's blood-soaked fur. Grey Wind licked his hand once, then was still. Robb bowed his head. The North had lost its first king's shadow, but they'd won. Moat Cailin held. The black tide broke. The mountain dead, and in the back tent a child cried. A boy, dark hair, pale eyes, Joffrey's blood, Stark bones. Later that night, Robb stood at the edge of the marsh, watching the pyres burn. Arya sat nearby, silent. Daenerys approached, cloaked in black. "You lost something," she said softly. Robb nodded. "More than I can say." "Then it's time to choose what you keep." She held out her hand. "Come south. Take King's Landing. Together." But Robb turned his eyes north. "My war's done. I did what I came to do. I saved my father. I saved my sisters. I avenged a red wedding before it happened. Then what now?" Robb looked back at her, tired, hardened. "I give the realm peace. That's more than any king has done in 100 years. And that's when the final twist hit. Sansa came forward, holding the boy. "This child will always be hunted," she said. "He's a symbol of both crowns. Yours, theirs." Robb took the child in his arms. And then he said something no one expected. "Then we crown him." "Wait, what?" "That's right." Robb Stark stepped down. He passed his sword, not to a successor, but to a guardian council, led by Sansa, guided by Arya, watched by Daenerys. The realm would no longer be ruled by one man on a throne, but by those who had bled for it. A new era, built not on bloodlines, but on choice. So here's where we land. Black small square Robb Stark. Kingbreaker, savior of the North, returned to Winterfell as warden, not king. Black small square Arya, the blade of justice, vanished into the east 1 month later. Never seen again. Black small square Sansa, crown protector of the realm until her son came of age. Black small square Daenerys, queen of the South, choosing diplomacy over destruction. Black small square the Iron Throne, melted. Drogon turned to slag the day Robb and Dany agreed the realm would no longer be ruled by one seat. And the name of the boy born on the battlefield? Jon Stark, not Joffrey's heir. Westeros' hope. And that's it. What if Robb Stark rescued Ned Stark from the Black Cells? He changed the war. He ended the cycle. He broke the throne without sitting on it. Not with dragons. Not with conquest. With honor sharpened by war. Because in the end, the North remembered, and the realm finally learned.